All right, so we are right at 6 o'clock, so I will kick us off. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for showing up this evening, and welcome to our virtual fireside chat. Very excited.
Sure. So I'm with an organization called manaftercancer.org, and really what our goal is we're trying to change the way men go through cancer. Man After Cancer inspires men to connect and avoid isolation during their cancer journeys. And we not only men who are patients, but also we men who are caregivers. Um, One of the organizations, and Man After Cancer does this in several ways. We have an annual retreat. We just had 150 men attend our annual retreat, just a weekend of fun for the patients. And we had a few caregivers who came as well. Just a 4-day retreat. They got to go swimming, hiking, play pickleball, play golf. Just an enjoyable retreat, a time to get away from Cancerland, right? We also have a chemo care backpack program, which we send patients a backpack filled of essentials they need while they're in treatment. We also have around 50 regional chapter groups where men meet up for a baseball game or go out to dinner or grab a drink together. Really try to have some time to have camaraderie, but also the time to kind of get away from cancer and be together as well. We do, and as I say, we do support men who are caregivers. And one of the organizations I work with too, because I am a colon cancer survivor, and I will say this, that before I was diagnosed with cancer, I was a caregiver for my dad who had prostate cancer. So I've been on both sides of the coin. And I've also worked with an organization called colontown.org because I'm a colon cancer patient. And they do have caregiver groups for caregivers. And I know a lot of the prostate cancer groups here also have caregiver groups within their organizations. But one organization that I've partnered with in the past is an organization called Jack's Caregiver Coalition, and it is an organization that focuses on men caring for someone with cancer. And some of their statistics is that 78% of guys that are caring for someone, or caring for a spouse or a partner, have little or no help. 67% of male caregivers work full time. They have a full time occupation while they're caring for that person going through cancer. 44% of male caregivers report that they have moderately or high financial strains as a result of caregiving. So there's a lot of barriers to those men who are caregivers to get support. Um, my own wife, who was my caregiver, really didn't seek support group because she had a group of friends that supported her. A lot of times men, and I know that as someone who was a male caregiver for a while, it's hard when you're working full time and then coming home to support that person to really find support for yourself. So those are definitely some barriers for that person who is a caregiver. And it's kind of, in a lot of cases, it's that person really wanting the support or seeking the support that kind of makes that happen. And if that answers.
Great. Thank you, Joe. Yeah, so what I'm hearing you say is that sometimes men's groups can really look very different from what you
Right.
sort of typically think of when you.
I jump in and add a little something?
Yes, please.
I would also say, Annette, and with this person that says her partner, the situation that she's in, that I would say, I'd say to her to say to him that I'm in it for the long haul, but I love you, and I'm carrying this burden too. And sometimes the support group will help me help you carry your burden so I don't burn out completely. And as Joe just said, if that partner's in a position where he or she is, say, picking up some extra work because of the finances, or there's family issues involved, and that caregiver is feeling rather spread thin. So be able to try to speak to the loved one with the idea that kind of empathize and understand where the burden and the emotional struggles that I'm going through, because I love you. And so I think that can nudge somebody to try the support group, knowing that I'm going to lessen that emotional burden on my spouse or significant other or partner.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, Mary, you asked a really good question or proposed a really interesting idea. A man who not only feels uneasy hearing about scientific jargon and, you know, just really doesn't give a crap about how cancer works. He just wants to get, you know, past his diagnosis. The idea of, you know, all these groups that have these presentations or invite doctors or have knowledgeable, you know, peers and people sit next to them. But there's got to be space. And, you know, in our male care system nationwide, we make that space for guys who just want to talk about the side effects. They just want to talk about piss, urine, erectile dysfunction. They want to talk about how uneasy they are in speaking with their doctors, if indeed that's the case. But there are many men who whether they know how to turn a computer on or not, who whether they have PhDs or didn't graduate primary school, they're not going to a support group to learn. They're going to a support group to be listened to feel that like they're not alone, you know, and to see other men sitting around them who have the same diagnosis and are still kicking and breathing and still alive, who have the same set of initial fears that the presenting guy has. Again, whether he's had a primary school education or 3 PhDs and a Nobel Prize, doesn't matter. When he's diagnosed and he's told he's got cancer and he's sitting there, he wants people to hear his story, you know, and, you know, a good group won't let the guy, you know, sweat and drone on for an hour and a half. He'll got, you know, the facilitator will guide him and, you know, be empathic and, you know, empathetic and, you know, helpful. But the groups that sort of just folk, and there are many, and I've seen them over the last 30 years, that just are a monthly meeting, that are didactic. You know, they have a lecture by the local urologist or health center guru or whatever, or boast about, you know, I've got the, you know, the name brand doctor that everybody refers to or whatever. Those are good for that particular focus, just to learn. But a support group is a different, you know, can of beans. You sit there to sort of share the taste of those beans and ask the person next to you, do they taste the same as they to you as they do to me? You know, and I think that's sort of been a failing for many organizations over the last 3 decades, but many are come to wise. I think Lou's group sounds like it's sort of shifting into that realm where it's less about, you know, there's radiation surgery, androgen deprivation therapy, prostate cancer is not pronounced with an extra R, you know, that kind of stuff. It's where if a man comes in and pronounces it prostrate, you don't get on his back. You just let him talk and listen and let him know, like, yeah, I used to say that too, you know, but it's okay because you're going to get through this. And as you see, you now have a bunch of brothers you didn't know existed before.
Right.
I was going to jump in and say, so Man Up to Cancer, we do have a Facebook group called the Howling Place Group, and it has 3,000 male members. And a lot of the conversations, a lot of times the men, when they come in, they're not even comfortable being on a Zoom. A lot of them have never even shared their stories. So a lot of times in the feed, that's where they'll do that in the group. They'll just start writing and writing and writing. A lot of it is just sharing their stories. And really it's there. The Howling Place group is more about emotional support. But the guys, you know, they will help each other out and they'll kind of help them find those treatment groups. But the Howling Place is primarily for emotional support and really dealing with the mental health side of cancer. But yeah, it's a feed. I've never seen men open up the way they do within that feed. It's pretty amazing amongst those 3,000 men, how they do that every day in the group.
Yeah, and Joe's hitting on like another interesting post-COVID point is that because of COVID, we've learned to do online groups in a manner that prior to COVID, you know, we just thought of them offhandedly as Skype groups. Now they're Zoom groups or whatever, you know. Um, the idea of not being able to speak or type in things anonymously is really gold. It's even platinum. I mean, like with mail. So, we had like these 82 groups before COVID spread out around the country. They met every week. People showed up. But we developed our online platform. Now we got well over 110,000 showing up just as of this morning, and we're probably on track for 130 in 2023. We had 102,000, and I think that's less about our expertise and the setting that we create, and more about the ability to make up a goofy name for yourself and share without the feeling that somebody's going to come back on you. I mean, you could do that on Facebook, you could do that on Mailcare. There are lots of other platforms that have these, text-based support communities, support groups, and you could do it 24/7. But it's being able to speak your mind from your heart, from your fears, from anything, and speak it at the tip of your finger by typing it in and attributing your thoughts to Billy Sunshine or Joe Superman or something, whatever, so that you don't even have to think about, like, is this going to bite me in the ass because somebody saw my real name and they're going to tell my boss or tell my relatives, or worse, tell my doctor that I was complaining about X, Y, or Z, and I didn't complain to him or her in their office, which is another valuable part of support groups, is this idea that you could vent, cry, moan, and celebrate successes among, your peers, other men, and other trans women, if indeed you're presenting that way. But you could do it without wondering whether that's a good thing to do in front of your doctor, because most cases, almost all cases, your doctor actually isn't there, and that's not to say there's a toxic quality to meeting with your doctor, but there's a quality of saying things in front of your doctor that inhibits people from saying anything. I mean, I've worked in hospital settings, and it's like, I see patients, how are you doing? How should I be doing? I'm feeling fine. And it takes three, iterations of questioning, or, a little, nudge and nudge to get them to actually share what's going on, so you could actually start treating it. An anonymous quality that an online support group, whether it's on Facebook or Health Unlocked, or or anywhere else, this is not to be underestimated. This is to be amplified, a gazillion times by every.
Let me add, one of the things that we're centered around is connectivity. And we're changing dynamics of connectivity in healthcare, and we're changing the dynamics of connectivity with the way men speak to each other. From a pastoral perspective, also pulling back to my pharmaceutical days and support care, psychology, my background also. One of the greatest challenges that we hear what we want to hear. We listen oftentimes to things we want to listen to. A person who's going through this challenge of the crisis of trauma and disease, they want to be heard. And oftentimes healthcare is designed, and support systems sometimes also are set up to tell you something. And what I think is being lost in some of the research that's becoming patient-centered is we're supposed to start listening to what is being said. And you'll find that a lot of these patients, I know from a pastoral perspective, when I go to them, the first thing I want to do, because I know a little bit about healthcare and had a little experience, is I want to hear what they're saying. And in support groups, they want to be heard. My backache, is that related to prostate cancer? My wife doesn't like me. Is that related to prostate cancer? Things that might seem a little minute, but it's important to them. And we can increase our connectivity when we move from sick care to health care. And healthcare is about listening. And support groups and men who have prostate cancer, the first label they get is they didn't want to talk. I can call someone or they can call me and ask me for prayer. I will pray with them and then I'll listen. And then I'm on the phone with them for an hour. Then I become their best buddy because they want to talk. Then you invite them to a support group and then they start leaning on each other. So I think one of the things that we're struggling with support groups is the ability to listen.
All right, I am muted first. I don't know if Ray was just trying to be polite. Probably was. Polite guy. There's a lot of things that we can do in this situation. The implication of the question is that this patient is after having surgery. That may not be the case. I may be wrong, but many patients have that concern that they will be in diapers after surgery. Very few patients are, at least in the longer term, in diapers after surgery. We do some things before surgery that include, it's really dark in here, I'm sorry. We can do some training that is done with a physical therapist who has a specialty and called the pelvic floor. And they do physical therapy for the pelvic floor. And it's like having a personal trainer to train the muscles to regain the urinary control. And that helps before, and it also helps doing it after the surgery. And I think it's even more effective if it's initiated before the surgery to help the patient not only identify how to use those muscles when the rubber meets the road after surgery, but it also helps minimize that risk afterwards. For the patient who continues to have trouble and is in diapers, one of the most important things we've done is try to map out a timeline for them to set up expectations for what it's like after surgery, which is that there tends to be a lot of leakage initially for the first few weeks or even months after surgery, and then it diminishes over time. And that is the typical pathway. There's a large variation in that as well. Some patients have no leakage ever. Others have terrible leakage that goes on and on. The patients really need to have a realistic expectation about what that is and how long it may take, because patients can be really dismayed by what happens if they don't expect anything. So part of it is expectations. Now, if things don't get better, there still are a lot of things that we can do to help. For example, some leakage is related to bladder dysfunction, and there are medications for that. If the muscles are still not working well after surgery, there are things that we can do that are surgical to correct it if it really does persist for many, many months or a year afterwards. I usually tell my patients personally that if at a year you're still having a significant amount of leakage that is bothersome, there are operations to do that. But that I'm also not trying to sell them on a second operation. Rather, I'm trying to tell them that there's hope if that is the case, which is uncommon. And in most experienced surgeons' record, they can call up how many patients have had to have that second operation done, and it's pretty uncommon. It's about 1 in 50. And that's probably not due to anyone being better than anyone else. It's probably going down because of pelvic floor physical therapy. Mm-hmm. I'll stop there and let Dr. Tan add anything.
Yeah, I would definitely echo. I'm a big believer in pelvic floor physical therapy. I think having a good physical therapist that you can call upon is an amazing addition to the team, and really can help with both improving and addressing the leakage, but also in terms of like education. And I think our team members who are part of the pelvic physical therapy team here are very compassionate, and are very caring, and they really do serve as that coach role. I think, some things about pelvic floor physical therapy that, are good to know about, especially if people may not be aware. I mean, people probably, for those who have prostate cancer and have looked at treatment, probably have heard or come across the term for Kegels, which is a type of exercise that people do. But really, the physical therapists really go on and do even more. They can, really, if it's okay with the patient, do some internal manipulations to really pinpoint exactly what muscle they want the patient to activate and strengthen up in order to help with the leak. That's why the results are so good. Because they do it way better than just like giving an instruction guide for Kegel exercises. The only other thing I would add too is that sometimes in cases where leakage may be more severe, sometimes like a temporary like sometimes I feel like just for patients, even just getting a reprieve from leakage that they may be experiencing can be a big benefit to them, just like kind of a break, kind of like a period where they're not having leakage. So things as things like Cunningham clamps or other penile clamps, just to give people the situation where they can go out to dinner with friends and know that they're not going to have leakage for those 2 or 3 hours. Those can be a big deal for patients. So that's something that we'll recommend on time to time, depending on what the situation may be.
I mean, yeah, we've got solutions and we've got fixes, but really you want to find out what's the patient's goal, and what's impeding the patient from following through with some of the fine solutions that exist for corrective interventions for the stressor side effects and the impact of surgery and radiation. Here's a guy who's saying, I don't know. In the support groups, though, we hear of people who feel relieved. I mean, a small percentage, but significant, like a 5 to 10% level of men who are usually post-surgical, who come to the groups and say, I can't get it up. I don't even want to try to get an orgasm by touching myself. And they talk about a sense of relief that the stressors around that are no longer an issue for them. And really, the question then is, how is it that this man in their 50s, 60s, or 70s, or whatever he is, has gotten to a point in his life where sex is no longer not only a goal, but a pleasure, even if it's masturbation? And that's the impact that prostate cancer has on many people. A kick in the ass to find out where you are at this stage in your life, what the effects of your prior decades of life have been on the choices you're making today and your hopes and plans for the years to come. And that's where I think doctors can improve their consults, and where support groups can actually do brilliant work, is providing a venue where people could sort of talk about things that are usually unimaginable. you know um, for example, there are men, well, again, a much smaller percentage than 5 or 10, but a significant nationwide, and we learned this prior to COVID in the in-person groups. There are men who find urinary incontinence a relief, because it gives them an excuse not to have to go out, that they feel that they're quite comfortable living an introvert style of life. And in a way, it's like a refreshment to them, a way to renew their lives, because prior to that, they were living on the edge of anxiety every time they got up in the morning and were challenged to go out. So, I think if this evening has a theme, it's that we have to listen better, we have to listen more deeply, and we have to not speak before somebody is fully spoken out.
Mhm.
I agree. One of the greater things that I'm investigating now as part of the research to connect healthcare and spirituality is listening to people and using phenomenology as a way of qualitative investigation. And one of the things that is missing, that came out in an earlier study, and it was specifically related to African American men, is that Black men don't talk. Now, having been around healthcare for over 25, 30 years, And then also being a person of clergy, I'd like to debunk that right now. Black men will talk. It's how we listen that changes the way they talk. And I think it's for all patients. I've just identified that in the specific area, because of prostate cancer and the differential approaches of results, that they have not been identified as a way to change its disparity and inequity. And part of it has been they haven't been able to hear what they're saying. Now, our focus is how do we change the mental dynamics of the engagement of healthcare and specifically for men. And the data is out there. The opportunity to learn is out there. And I think the patients who are listening in are probably shaking their heads and saying, I've been trying to say this, to hear what you're saying. And that's how we have to look at support groups and patients right now. Patients are coming to the table more and more saying, I want to hear how I can engage in my own healthcare. And we're still using the old model to create new solutions.
I'm not a man of faith or anything, Paul, but I'll say an amen to that.
In our support groups, the main two issues are the ED and the incontinence. And there are a few who say they use the longevity rationality that we've been married 50 years, so I don't have to have sex now. But we find all kinds of things in marriages now. People getting married in their 50s and 60s. And so some of them are very concerned about it, about both. But I think the ED thing is it comes up a lot in the group. So I'm glad to hear about some of the newer things that are coming out that men can discuss it with their doctors.
I think this sort of boils down to less about are there groups for specific people, but why there are groups for specific people. And, that sort of leads us to the understanding that people are going to feel less anxious if they're surrounded by people who understand where they're coming from, who get who they are. Just like the global proposition that cancer survivors understand each other in a way that people not diagnosed with cancer don't understand them. I mean, Lance Armstrong basically crystallized that as saying, we're doing stuff for people who get it. The idea that there's another level, another tranche where anxiety can be reduced and comfort and safety and a sense of welcoming can be amplified by saying this is a group of people from a farming region. This is a group of PhDs. This is a group of single men who have never been married, heterosexual men who, for whatever reason, just never found a love of their life that they could sustain for a long enough period of time to engage in a marriage or in a long-term partnership. There are people who are diagnosed with prostate cancer in their 30s and 40s, and there are a lot of those. We had one guy who was, and he was written up in the Wall Street Journal, like 2 decades ago, probably now. But I mean, he was diagnosed at age 27 with a legit case of prostate cancer. And it was just a quirk that his PSA test was included on his blood work for his annual physical. He was a Wall Streeter and needed that comprehensive exam for his employment. The idea of having groups that are parsed out not just around advanced stage, which we do, and Male Care pioneered those groups, or young men. Again, Male Care pioneered young, guys diagnosed in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. But the idea that religion matters, Where you come from matters, your social standing matters, and your gender and sexual identity matters. And in particular, for transgender women, it's not just about sexual identity or gender. It's about how do you get treated when you're on estrogen for transitioning? How do you get treated when you want everyone to refer to you as Ms. or they, them, and yet every time you go to a waiting room or a hospital, you're at risk of being misgendered, of somebody calling you with a male attribute, which is deeply hurtful for a transgender woman. So the idea of men and women being vulnerable to prostate cancer is a proposition we've been promoting for about a decade now. And I think all of us should come to understand that prostate cancer can be diagnosed in males and females, basically in everyone. Transgender women typically will say, there'll be a discussion, am I a woman or am I a trans woman? Am I a transgender woman? All of that sort of is important, but I think even more important is the idea that we're all vulnerable to prostate cancer, and that includes partners, spouses, sons, and daughters. When someone's diagnosed, that affects everyone who you consider a family member, whether it's a blood relative or just a deep and caring long-term friend. I mean, prostate cancer affects the initially diagnosed person in an extraordinary way, but that resonates to everyone in that person's life. So I think it's productive to think of prostate cancer as something that affects humanity, everyone, and then the helpful interventions, particularly around psycho and social and economic support, have to be thought of within the the mise en scène, the cohorts, the way people describe where they come from and who they are, which is to say, it's useful to have a good, open to everyone kind of group for prostate cancer support, but it's equal or perhaps slightly more helpful to also have, parallel to that, a group for gay men, a group for transgender women, a group for partners and spouses, a group for sons and daughters, a group for men presenting with a disease, which is a very interesting cohort because those guys don't particularly, I mean, in general, they benefit from sharing the closer to death, kind of feeling that a newly diagnosed person not only doesn't necessarily feel, but is not encouraged to understand as that's his situation. So, yeah, I mean, this idea that, I mean, MailCare runs lots of groups specific to different groups of people. And as a consequence of our work, that's been replicated globally from Australia to South Africa to Iceland. All of those groups, particularly the gay men with prostate cancer groups, they were seeded, they were started from a little group that met on 14th Street in Lower Manhattan, in 1997. And, that's extraordinary that, it's a global phenomenon now, but it's less about the phenomenon and more about the truth of it, that these, specific interventions and clearly defined safe and welcoming places are helpful to people at scale and are helpful for extending their life and increasing the happiness of their life. In essence, helping men live longer and happier lives.
Well, I will mention, I know I mentioned colontown.org earlier, and Colontown, obviously it's more colon cancer, but it is 120 Facebook groups, and it goes anywhere from stage 1 group all the way to metastatic cancer, stage 4. They have caregiver groups, they have group just for men, they have groups just for women. They have they have a group called Prideville, for the LGBTQ community. So, and that's kind of the idea, but it is more for the colon cancer community. But But that's really their purpose, is to offer that peer-to-peer education and emotional support within those 120 Facebook groups.
As a psychiatrist, I've seen so many men dealing with the diagnosis of prostate cancer, and many of them have been had treatment, spent years in Eastern North Carolina talking to individuals, and they get a little bit of information, and it's hard to understand sometimes where this information has come from, but they're usually talking about side effects of either a surgery or radiation or whatever the treatment was, and their loved ones around them or friends around them, they'll hear them talk, and then they will interpret. They say, "Oh, your doctor did you wrong," and so when somebody says something like this to me, especially when they say something like, "Does this happen a lot?" I immediately go to what happened, what treatment did you receive, and what do you know about the treatment you received, and a lot of times what I've just I've learned is that they were in such shock when they listened to their treatment team that they just couldn't retain it. And this is one of the reasons why both of the action team and Finn, we always encourage men to have a loved one with them in that interview with the doctor. So while they're in the middle of being shocked by the diagnosis and what's going on, they have that loved one standing next to them, sitting next to them, that can hear what the doctor's saying and respond to that loved one with, "Oh, your doctor said this." All right. And a lot of times when I hear this, I say, "All right, let me tell you about the Prostate Health Education Network." I'm a Finn ambassador. I'm not a prostate cancer survivor, but I've been in this space for 30 years. And what I love about Finn is that they have, through their website, Finn Path, which will give you all kinds of information about the illness. And as Joe talked about, we talk about each stage, whether that's stage 1, 2, 3, the Gleason score, all of this information, so we can give them the good information they need to understand that their treatment team made them their best decision, right? And that understanding that side effects do occur, and the reality though is a lot of times even that causes some difficulty. So Finn has come up what we call Finn TV, and they can go to our website and they can listen to our speakers, our doctors, myself, and others like Dr. Crawford, who is head of our medical education program, so that they can listen and learn versus having them trying to read, as we heard others say, some scientific information that they really can't absorb or understand, but to be able to turn on the channel, so to speak, and learn a lot about the disease, learn about each and every individual treatment, from immunotherapy to the Da Vinci, to this, to that, and gain that knowledge, and then realize that what I'm going through is temporary for the most part, and things will get better. And then I pop on my psychiatric hat, and I always try to get that individual to understand that through another program on Finn, it's called actually more lighter. It's called Daddy's Boys, and it's about a family where the patriarch is diagnosed and being treated for prostate cancer. And my favorite episode that you'll have is one of mine, where I talk about that emotional situation, and I basically talk about emotional resilience. And one of the things that I like our audience to hear when we are dealing with these side effects, dealing with, did I have the right treatment? I read something, I should have had that. No, I didn't know that was available. All that confusion, but recognize you did your very best, and your providers have given you their best care. And so I like folks to understand that you're human. Yeah, and a lot of times, as we heard from Dr. Tan and Dr. Wallen, the physical therapy. Well, not only did you need the physical therapy for your pelvic floor, but you need to take that walk around the block and smell the roses and listen to the birds. All right. Remember that we always can overcome most crises, and that change is part of life. And so, get to know who you really are. And yes, you may be doubting about your situation, but try to keep a very positive outlook of yourself, and that hopefulness that I want to install in you, so that you don't feel that if you've been overcome and overwhelmed, but you are, but understand that this too shall pass. And a lot of times that we heard with both the support group that Louis in, Amal Care, one that Joe's involved in, and others here in the screen, Phil and others, that you need those supportive connections. And so it's not about somebody did me wrong. It's about I'm overwhelmed with what I'm going through right now. And I like to always end with telling everybody, folks, let's try to keep a sense of humor, because you need a little humor to make it from day to day. But again, Finn is an opportunity that we all can benefit from, as it is a resource laden a website. And I beg to say, and I'm very proud of it, I think it is the best website currently available for men going through the diagnosis of prostate cancer, the treatment of prostate cancer, and get that education in a very succinct and understandable, so that they and their loved ones can make appropriate decisions and understand that they are not alone. So I highly recommend Prostate Health Education Network, Fen Path, Fen TV, and we even have Fen Church. So we try to cover every base possible, so that we can beat this morbidity and mortality. Because
if I may add some things to really spectacular answers from both of you on this. Several really important points were brought up here that I want to amplify from the perspective of the provider. And I do think it's incumbent on people who deliver the news and talk about treatment options with patients to get them through that initial shock period of hearing the diagnosis. Because if we do a good job there, and admittedly, I don't think that's done well globally, but if we do a good job, then the what we call regret afterwards is less likely to happen. The first thing I say when I walk into these rooms and have the conversations with patients and their families, I do encourage very strongly for them to have another pair of ears in the room, whether that is a spouse, a child, brother, a friend, whatever it is, to help them hear stuff. It's very difficult to hear anything beyond the diagnosis. And we tend to go on, admittedly, as physicians when we talk about this stuff. And I encourage people to take notes, especially the person who is not the patient, to take notes. But the very first thing I try to do is take down the temperature, the sense of alarm related to the diagnosis. And I even say, let's lower the temperature because we have time. No one is dying from prostate cancer today. No one in this room, or tomorrow, or next year, and probably not even in 5 years. But we're going to get after this in a way that gives you long-term survival. Let's figure out what the right thing is for you, because there are so many options available, and there's time to consider all of them. We're in the learning and education phase of this. That's where the great websites like Fen and others come in to help with patients, because it supplements this conversation. We give them a booklet about prostate cancer. I hand them a book. It's about 90 pages long. It's available online, and there's other good resources available online. But I give them one that we have from the Prostate Cancer Foundation. And I say, look, there's no quiz on Monday, but this is your resource to start learning about this, because there's so much to learn. I emphasize that it is not urgent to treat. In fact, I also emphasize how important it is to get a second opinion. Every person should get a second opinion for prostate cancer. I urge them to get an appointment with a radiation oncologist as well as a urologist. We do that in what's called a multidisciplinary way, so the patient gets seen by both the same day. That's not available everywhere. It's available in many academic medical centers, but you need a variety of opinions in order to really effectively not only process the news, but to learn fully about the options. So what I'm talking about is buying time and learning, and then there tends to be a lot less regret if patients are fully informed. And that I think is super important. And I tell them at the end of the visit, there's no decisions today. I don't even want to know. I want to know what we can do to help you get ready for the next step. Let's make a decision in 3 months. Let's get those other opinions. Let's learn about this. Let's go to the support groups. Let's get the online resources.
Let me try. Dr. Wallen's absolutely spot on in noting the man who feels regret is the man who wasn't well prepared with what the potential outcomes might be. And that preparation could come from the physician, should to a large degree certainly come from the physician. It should come from discussions with their family. But in addition to like the first and second opinion, I think there needs to be a feeling that there's a third opinion, and that's from people who have gone through this. And that's where the support group idea comes in. That goes, like if you're presenting to a urologist, goes, the radiation oncologist or, et cetera. Maybe even a nurse practitioner who could give you, or a medical oncologist, or somebody who could give a more holistic global presentation of what's going on for you based on your chart, which only the doctor will have in front of them. But to suggest go to a support group too, hear from other men, and go to a good support group, which has men that have been attending, not some once a month thing run by the local doctor or some, or just a bunch of people who are there to complain and will scare the pants off of you. And it's hard to know what a good support group is. Obviously, branding helps, and we think male cares groups are extraordinary, but there are others as well. And by the way, so FEN is a resource, but I mean, let me put in a pitch for canceracademy.org, which is relaunching in Christmas of 2024. I mean, we've been referring people to that for years. People who don't have the patience to read a 90-page PDF or don't know how to digest or synthesize information that they hear during a consult or from their tape recording of that consult later that evening. The canceracademy.org proposition is like it's material that's digested by patients and presented and validated from peer-reviewed articles and by other physicians who just make sure people aren't printing nonsense. So canceracademy.org and, FEN, and the idea that we have information that can prep a patient so they understand what they're getting into and can sort of learn that information at 3 in the morning when they're most vulnerable and most frightened and don't want to wake up their spouse or partner or call up their kids, or are living alone and have lived a life of being alone and just want to connect with some hardcore validated information that will, might be not what they want to hear, but at least it'll make them understand what the trade-off is for living a longer life. And that's important,
Things that happens most often is as people are diagnosed with any type of incurable disease, they look for opportunities to strengthen their faith or strengthen their resolve that they're going to work through this. And that's all it's about. For them, it's just faith. Many of them are very weak in their faith or don't believe in anything specifically, but they want to believe that there's something that is helping them to be stronger. When we look at the spiritual realm of things and the references, is one of the things in Luke 3 and 4, it says, "Physician, heal thyself." That means is that one has to heal themselves and have a belief that what they're doing is right and righteous before they can move to the next level. Quite often, when I get to being pulled into situations and answering this question, people have been given stage 4 or the prognosis that's not looking very good at all. This is often with African American men right now, which we know has a higher ratio of probability of getting prostate cancer, but they also have a higher probability of not getting that support that they need. And they are finding themselves in stage 3 and stage 4. And the message to them is that you're going to die. There's nothing we can do. And what do you say to those people? And the point that I was making earlier about connectivity, we've got to improve the connectivity for all patients. And the first thing we have to start doing is start listening to people and say to my members or constituents, first, support
Paul, you're
groups
breaking
about
up.
helping other people get through the valley. Hopefully, get people through the valley. But I argue, and I've argued for 30, 45 years since being in healthcare, that we're more in sick care than healthcare. Sometimes we're in non-spiritual care than spiritual care. But people are looking at us to hear what we say. Our hopes are. And the hopes is that we decrease some of this non-connectivity that we hear. And the only way we can do this is to inspire hope and be truthful. There's a lot of distrust out there. And specifically coming from the African American community when it comes to prostate cancer. These are validated. You can use all the quantitative data. I've read it all. It's out there. The question that they're asking now, and we think the patients don't hear this, is why is there difference? So I say to people that no, God is not upset with you. God is listening for you to call them. Now, many say, well, I don't believe in God. But whomever they're calling to, they've got to have this feeling that somebody is listening. And that's what we start this conversation about, listening. How do we listen to those we are serving?
Jump in, Paul. Let me just also recommend we have Finn trials. And when I hear something like that, yes, I give the emotional response, but at the same time, I encourage folks to go to Finn trials because I've seen many men go into a clinical trial and live decade plus more. Because folks, we're seeing stage 4 men diagnosed with stage 4 living 15 and 16 years. And so I just think clinical trials is got to be pushed. We don't have enough Black folks in them, and clinical trials give us cutting edge treatment, and we'll get either the standard of care or what the future holds. And so I would encourage men that are hearing that, hey, I'm at the end of my road, please reach out for clinical trials.
Yes, currently I'm a 21-year survivor and a support group's facilitator for 15 years. We were involved with both the local Wake County support group, the Prostate Cancer Coalition, and the National Coalition group. for those who want or desiring to become a facilitator, you have to have a desire and the time to take on this task and devote quite a bit of time and effort into medically learning what is required to establish an organization group and manage the group. And one of the best ways to do that is with other facilitators. And now, if a facilitator is wanting to leave a group, then you can follow in his footsteps and get lots of great guidance. I checked with Terry Gwinski, and us2org still has a thing called the Prostate Cancer College. And yes, I've attended that. And it's a place where you get background information on the guidelines of being a facilitator with a group, and things that allow you to manage the group and know how to do leadership with the group. It also gives you leadership qualities. One of the things you will develop in being a facilitator is you become more medically educated and more in control of your own health situation. And so this is one of the benefits of becoming a facilitator. And of course, there are many different meetings and organizations that you can have contact with and learn more about different situations that prostate cancer survivors and newly diagnosed are involved with, that you can take back to your group and make some applications in certain situations of where you're the group leader. As far as the pros and cons of having a facilitating group with a hospital or a medical group, you can have a support group anywhere. If a restaurant would allow you to have a meeting, that's a fine place to have one. And churches are a very good place to have groups with support of family members. For hospitals, yes, in the early days, Rex Hospital was free. They just offered us a big auditorium, and we used it for our group. And we had in many types of doctors and medical experts to come and just answer questions and be in contact so that members could become familiar with treatments, techniques, and other members and side effects. So it was an open kind of question situation. Of course, there are some guidelines in dealing with these kinds of things. And of course, one common guideline we have to make statements about initially in our meetings is we can't talk down about the doctors or the medical organization. We're here to learn and gain for ourselves from the questions that we bring. I know the first medical support group that I went to, I really had a string of questions, and I fell into it right away. I said, this is the place for me. And so that got me started. And so over the years, I've been to a number of PCRI conferences, and my two oncologists have had prostate cancer. Quite a bit of experience that you learn dealing with these types of things. Now, in hospitals that give you a free rein, it's really nice to be able to call in any medical experts or expertise that you like, or requested by the members. In some hospitals, they have to add guidelines of their own to kind of protect their own image. And so you have to follow their guidelines as well as the support group guidelines. And of course, they are legally bound to do this for other things related to other meetings as well as prostate cancer. And so sometimes it will feel that you're not quite as free to do the things you want. However, most of the time, those hospitals are very liberal with using their doctors to come to your meetings. Any expert medical experts in that hospital will attend your meetings and discuss whatever the group would like to discuss. So there are some pros and cons to both types of situations dealing with facilitating a group. And so at this point, I'm kind of out of the loop of being a facilitator, but some of our former members of our group still call me and talk about things, and I'm still available to talk to anyone, anywhere, or go in front of a group and talk about my experiences over the 15 years as a facilitator or as a prostate cancer survivor. Now, of course, all of these issues we discussed about erections and family problems and this and that, one of the guiding lights that kept me going was, will I live long enough to kiss my grandchildren? And so that surpassed all of the other problems that I had. So that seemed to keep me going.
Well, Mary, if I can say, about 8 months ago, the cancer center, small cancer center in Pinehurst, North Carolina, with First Health, reached out to me about starting a men's cancer support group, and it's a sort of what Mr. Ross was saying earlier. It's a small group. We're growing slowly. We generally have about four, maybe five men come to each meeting. Two of my men are prostate cancer survivors who are going through treatment, and it's been a little bit of work. Luckily, I have the support of the social worker at the hospital, and I have the support of the oncology nurses, which makes a big difference when you've got people in those institutions that are there to support you what you're trying to do. And they kind of help. They help me. They reach out to the patients and invite them to come, and we do it in like a 2 hour window so that the guys can. They're there for treatment. They can stop by. If they stop by for 10 minutes or half an hour or 45 minutes and just want to talk, they can. But it's been a little bit of a go, but it's the great thing for me has been I've had the support of that institution who's helping me build it.
We shouldn't neglect the idea that Phil very eloquently sort of illustrated the value of a group of men sitting around talking about prostate cancer, even virtually, because as you were talking about the question, will you live to see your grandchild? You were welling up in tears, or close to it. And that's the value, if you don't know what a support group is, it's a place where you could cry in front of a bunch of guys that you've never met before, may never meet again. But the idea that you can share emotion is unique to the support group setting when it's well run, and right now we've got a bunch of guys who are experienced in that, so I think Phil just organically felt safe around that. But these are opportunities nationwide, globally now because of online groups. And I think one other way to sort of get into the support group I don't know, saddle or whatever you want to call it, is around peer-to-peer navigation. You could start small. You could start bringing yourself up to speed as someone who is willing to sit over a cup of coffee or a beer or lemonade or at a gun range or in a sinking rowboat or whatever, and listen to another man diagnosed with prostate cancer. Actually, one of the ways to sort of get up to speed on how to do that, the canceracademy.org that I mentioned earlier, that has a support group leadership academy, which is a BS way to describe a bunch of online lessons that you could sort of do in a couple of hours and sort of gather up to speed all the specifics that you need to run a group. Same thing around peer-to-peer navigation. And with that, the idea of being able to talk to people one-to-one is almost equally as valuable as sitting in a room as we are with 10 other people, 11 people, I guess. It's a slightly different dynamic, but I think we shouldn't discount the idea of sort of, and the AA model sort of validates that, the idea that a one-to-one meeting is as warm and helpful as a group of 10 or 20 people. And, that might be the entryway or the first step towards getting yourself going as a support group leader, if indeed that's something you think will be gratifying to you.